Alright, hello and welcome to my first video on C++. Today we're going to be talking about printing Hello World to the console. So open up your favorite IDE. Personally, I like to use Microsoft Visual Studio, and that's what I'll be using in all of these tutorials. So let's create a new project. Let's go to File, New, and then Project. Oops. Alright, now it's going to prompt you, which of these would you like? We're going to want a Windows 32 console application because we're going to want to display the Hello World in the console, the terminal. So I'm just going to name my project Hello World. Let's click OK. Now, do we want a precompiled header? No. I'll talk about this in my later videos. We don't really need to talk about headers yet until we get into functions, and more so into object-oriented development. So just go ahead and click Finish. Give it a sec. Alright. Now I'm going to delete all this, but you'll have it there. So, well, I'm going to keep this. We're going to need to include this standard library, the standard header. So what we need to do is we need to do exactly this. We need to define an entry point for the console application. The way you do that in C++ is simply by writing this integer main, and then at the end it returns 0. Returning 0 will close the console. This will open a console, and right now if I was just to build it and run it, it'll open a console and close it. Now let me show you how we're going to be printing Hello World to the console screen. So we're going to need to include a couple things. Actually, just one. We're going to need to include IOStream. IOStream, what that is, it's a library that allows us to use these functions that print out to the terminal window and also are capable of taking data in from the terminal window from the user. So I'm also going to using namespace std. What the std? Standard is what std means. So I'm using the standard namespace. And what that allows me to do is that allows me to call these these variables cout without having to specify where they come from, because they come from the standard library. And since I'm using this namespace, I don't have to specify it. So if I wanted to print hello world, all I have to do is type that. Now these little alligators now let me think about a way for you to help you remember this. So think about it like this. So what cout means literally is console output. So if you think about the alligators where they're pointing, so from the console we're going to output, so it's pointing to the console. From this console we're outputting this, and then this closes the cout statement, and I stop it, or rather I end the line using this end line statement. Now, I may have just hosed you down. It may be a lot to take in, but it's very simple once you get the hang of it. Once you just start messing around and creating classes, or rather creating projects like this yourself. So I'm just going to show you what happens when I run this. So when I run this, it should print hello world and then close instantly. And I'll tell you why. Boom, we didn't even get to see it. Look at that. So what we can do is we can put a break here on return 0. First, let me say, before I explain the break, let me explain what happened. So what it did was it went into this main function. This is the entry point for the console application. It went into this entry point. It executed this first line of code, printing hello world to the console. And then right after, since that's done, it moves on to the next line of code that's available, which is return 0. Return 0 then closes the window. So since there's nothing in between there to keep that window open, it just closes. Now let me show you further. So using the breakpoint, I can show you how, bam, look, it says hello world. So this breakpoint has stopped return 0 from executing. So far the only code that's executed in here is this cout line, hello world. Now when I hit continue, that's going to let the breakpoint pass, and it's going to let this line of code execute, returning 0, hence closing the window, as you just saw. So I'm going to show you a way to keep the terminal window open without using breakpoint. So I'm going to define an integer called freeze terminal. Or not define, I'm just declaring it. I've just declared an integer called freeze terminal, and it's been allocated on the stack. I'll talk about the stack and the heap in other videos. For now, just know that you need not worry about any memory associated with this variable, because it is not located on the stack or on the heap. It is located on the stack. So to freeze this, to hold the terminal open, we're going to use a cin statement. So it's basically the opposite alligators, going that direction. So cin, and then I want to get from the user a value for my freeze terminal. And then remember, you have to end every line of code with a semicolon, even using statements. If you don't, the compiler will not accept it, and you're just not going to be able to build your code. So let me show you what happens when we run this code. Boom, it holds the window open, because right now what it's doing is it knows that I have this integer freeze terminal. So what it's done is it's entered here at main. I've declared this freeze terminal, executes this first line of code, declaring freeze terminal, that integer. It prints out to the console, hello world, and then breaks to a new line because of the end line at the end. It then prompts the user to input data for the integer I declared above, holding the window open. Now I like to use this for school projects because it helps the graders, because they don't have to go and put in break statements or define something, an integer like we just did here, and cin. You know, it just holds the window open so they can read the output. So what it's asking right now, this little flashing underscore, you could say, is this prompt. It's asking me to enter an integer, excuse me, for freeze terminal. Once I do that, it's going to go ahead. Once I hit enter, it's going to go ahead and pass that line, this line of code here. It's going to pass this line of code, and it's going to execute the next line, returning 0. I'm sure you can guess what's going to happen. That's right, it closes. Alright, now let me show you, before we exit this, let me show you one more way that we can print this out without having to type it. We can use a variable, a string variable, to hold what we want to talk about. What you're going to do is you're going to need to include string. So, now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and say string hello is equal to hello world, semicolon. And then instead of this, we can place our variable in here. Now, it's going to do the same exact thing. The output will look exactly the same. Boom, hello world, and it's prompting me for the next line of code, which is inputting an integer for freeze terminal. Input that integer, press enter, goes to the next line of code, returns 0, and closes the window. Alright, that'll be all for my first video. On the next video, I will talk about printing hello world using a function. Thanks for watching.